Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives. And happy 4th of July weekend everyone. I hope everyone had a good 4th of July yesterday. I didn't, my dog went nuts and I had to calm him down. But you're not here to listen to that story, as today we're going to be talking about the 5th movie to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Captain America, the First Avenger. And as with all the other solo films and not sequels, I suppose I should get into my history with Captain America prior to seeing this movie. Well, for starters, I don't really know how I got introduced to Captain America. I know I heard of him somewhere. I heard that he was like I knew he was a Marvel hero and that he was a member of the Avengers, but for the life of me, I didn't really know that much about him, and if I'm being honest, I didn't care that much about him. To me, Captain America was a guy in a big blue star-spangled suit that I think looked a little weird, so I didn't really put much stock in him. But I was thankfully introduced to more of Captain America's backstory and history with, once again, Ultimate Avengers. I learned that Captain America was a soldier in World War II thanks to that film. That he actually did have superpowers, kind of. That because he was a soldier that was 4F, he was deemed unfit to actually fight in the war, so he got this. So he took this serum that pretty much made him stronger and faster and all these other cool ways. But unfortunately, there wasn't more of him, as I actually kind of learned from watching this film. So the superhero, him actually having superpowers did kind of appeal him more to me, but actually seeing him as a character, I thought he was really cool. He was strong, but he was strong, an adept fighter, actually kind of moralistic. He actually did fit the whole superhero angle, and actually seeing him as an active force, I actually started liking him a lot more. As such, when the Avengers film started getting hinted, I was kind of looking forward to seeing this movie coming up, because I kind of wanted to see more about him. And I had learned a bit more about Captain America through the grapevine, like through other shows and so forth, so I was aware enough about him to know like, I think one of his enemies, not a lot, just like that one. So I did learn a bit more, but other stuff I learned about Captain America, I learned through supplementals and so forth. So with that being said, I was kind of looking forward to seeing this film, and when I first saw it, I did remember liking it very much. I know I liked it a lot more than Thor, and I'll say that right now, it is better than Thor. But with that being said, is it a great movie? Yes and no. I'll get I'll talk about that when we'll get into that after the plot summary. And I'm also going to be referring to these notes right here. I did have notes on my phone, but I'm using that as a light right now, so unfortunately I can't really do much with that. So unfortunately I can't really use that as a guide for this one, but anyway. The film actually kind of opens up in present day, whether it's in the Arctic. What's going on is that some Arctic explorers have found something in the ice that they need to tell the government about. When, of course, they send out 2 agents to check it out, and of course they're wondering what the heck it is, why do they have to call people so high up, and it turns out that they find what is pretty much a large ship embedded in the ice. Of course these people are curious about it, so they go in to investigate it, and while they do find a bunch of old frozen stuff, there is one thing in there that they immediately gets a rise out of them, as they say that they need to call higher-ups in Washington. Sorry, my dog just jumped on the bed. And that as a result of that, and that whoever this is, he's been waiting long enough, and we see that whatever they found, it has the Captain America shield. But that makes you wonder, how the heck did that get? What's going on? How did this get here? Well, the film then kind of gets into that bit of backstory. As the first thing we go back a few decades to Tornsberg, Norway, in March of 1942. About a few years into World War II. Pretty much what's going on is that either at a mausoleum, tomb, or monastery, we see these guys saying that someone is coming in and that they're coming fast, and of course the head of these guys is like, oh, people have come before that failed. It's like, but this one's coming, but this one's different. He's not. This one's different. They'll probably get through, and they tell him he'll find nothing. But of course, he starts kind of changing his tune when a freaking tank breaks down their door. Immediately after that, a black car rolls in, and unfortunately, the first guy that said that someone was coming got crushed in the rubble. And a bunch of soldiers step out of the tank and kind of hold the older guy at gunpoint. After that, a man steps out of the car, and we later learn this man is named Johann Schmidt, played by Hugo Weaving, and that immediately gets a 2 thumbs up for me. And of course, Johann apparently says that he's been looking for this place for a while, but unfortunately, it's been well hidden, and so he wants to know what. And so the guy says that whatever he's looking for is not here, and he think, well, then why go to such a lengths to hide that doesn't exist? As such, they go to the center of the tomb and open up a single grave. And inside they find a skeleton clutching a cube. The idea is supposed to be that this is like kind of put simple, and of course Hugo Weaving holds the cube and immediately smashes it because this is obviously a fake. He said as what he's looking for is the Tesseract, the thing that we saw at the end of Thor. And while the guy that's in the head of this place is not very willing to tell him where the Tesseract is, he changes tune when Schmidt threatens to turn his men on all the villagers surrounding this place, and so he directs him to a mural of Yggdrasil, the World Tree. As such, he begins kind of investigating it and upon examining the roots, he finds a little shelf wherein he finds the Tesseract. And upon getting in, he orders all his men to pretty much just shoot the guy and everyone around him. And so after that, we then cut to New York as we're introduced to this film's main character, Steve Rogers, a short little twig of a man who desperately wants to join the army. Unfortunately, he cannot. Like I said, he's just a shrimp. Like, he's short, no muscles to him. He probably wouldn't be able to lift a bayonet even if he tried. And on top of that, he's got a lot of health problems. So even if he was a lot better, he would not be a very capable fighter. So he's listed as 4F, and unfortunately for him, this is not his first attempt. Like, he's gone to multiple enlistment sites to try and get in, stating he's from various cities and so forth, just wanting desperately to join the army, but every single time he's listed as 4F, and it's something he's not exactly, it's not exactly. So yeah, he's as such, no matter what, he's just kind of stuck at home. Not helped by the fact that his friend James Buchanan Barnes, aka Bucky, has been enlisted, and he's joining the battalion that Steve's father was a member of, the 107th Battalion, which Steve kind of would like to be a part of, but again, 4F. As kind of a going away thing, Bucky takes Steve on a double aid at I suppose you can say, an exposition of tomorrow. It's essentially the world of tomorrow. And the person in charge of it is Howard Stark. So yeah, it's kind of like a pre-Stark expo. But while Bucky is trying to impress the ladies and trying to get him and Steve some time, Steve kind of wanders off into the enlistment area of the park, wherein he tries to do the same trick again, and of course Bucky is trying to chastise him, saying, "Why are you doing this? You're not going to get in." But Steve is still determined to fight in this war. Like, he wants desperately to go to war, and it's not for glory or he's trying to prove himself or anything. He just thinks that people are dying, and he can't just sit around. He just can't sit on his hands and pretend that everything's fine. And as such, Bucky realizes he can't talk Steven out of this, so they both kind of have a little hug, and they say their goodbyes as Bucky's leaving in the morning, and odds are Steve's not going to see him for the rest of the night. And they get a nice little thing where Bucky says, "Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone," and Steve says, "Why would I? You're taking all the stupid with you." And it's nice, but during this exchange, we see this older guy watching Steve and overhearing how he wants to go to war. As such, when Steve goes to the physical area to try and get himself checked in, a nurse comes in and tells the doctor to step away. At which point, when Steve's wondering what's going on, the doctor just tells him to stay there, and in walks in the guy from earlier with an MP. And so the old guy reveals himself as Dr. Abraham Erskine. Or Erskine. I think it might. And it's pronounced Erskine here, but I think I might have heard it pronounced Erskine somewhere else. I don't know. I'm just gonna say Erskine. As such, Dr. Erskine tries to ask Steve why he wants to join the army. Is it to kill Nazis, make himself look like a hero? It's like, do you want? And Steve says, I don't really want to kill anybody. I just don't like bullies. And so Dr. Erskine hears that and says that he can give Steve a chance, though that's all he can give him. As such, he takes his recruitment form and lists him as 1A, meaning pretty much allowing Steve to join the army. For what? Well, we see that what happens is that, we see that when Steve goes to the army, it turns out that what Erskine signed him up for was something called a super soldier program. Pretty much, what's going on is that Dr. Erskine has developed a serum that when injected into someone can make them stronger, faster, just all around better. And pretty much the program that Steve is and pretty much the training that Steve's getting right now is just supposed to be their way of trying to find the perfect soldier for them. As such, the colonel in charge is not exactly convinced that Steve is the best candidate for the job because he is a shrimp. But Erskine vouched for him and said he's going to be, and so he's in, and while Steve is constantly given a hard time because he's so small, he does kind of help make up for it, especially when he kind of gets the vouching of another person in the yards. This being Agent Peggy Carter. It's from the Strategic Sciences something. I know it starts with an R because the abbreviation is SSR, so don't quote me on that. So if someone could tell me what the R is, that's nice. But she's also here to help in this because it's them that's funding the program, and even the colonel's actually a part of this the colonel's actually a part of this. But pretty much, Dr. Erskine has told the colonel right off the bat that he thinks that Steve is not, that he plans on picking Steve for the super soldier serum, which the colonel is not exactly happy with, because again, he's a shrimp. He might not be able to do it. But Dr. Erskine says that he probably has heart, and of course Carter vouches for him. But he keeps trying to say, and he thinks it's not a good idea, and even to try and prove his point, because he thinks that another soldier named Hodgkins would be a better candidate. He throws in a fake grenade and says it's a grenade, while everyone else, but he's kind of proven wrong, as while everyone else runs off, Steve immediately tries covering it with his body so that he's the only one that gets hurt. So yeah, pretty much Steve, what he lacks in physical strength kind of makes up for with his heart and his brains to a degree, as during training he was doing a run with a bunch of other candidates, and at the halfway point there was a pole with a flag on it, and it was said that if you can get the flag and give it to the instructor, then you could ride the rest of the way with Agent Carter in her van. And apparently for 17 years no one is able to pull it off, and so after all the other soldiers fail, Steve just comes up, and his way of getting it, he just knocks over the pole by taking out the supports and just grabbing the flag while it's on the ground. It's very creative. As such, he still thinks that Steve doesn't really have a shot because even with all that heart, he's still skinny and weak. But Erskine still selects him. We don't actually see him telling him that he's selected, but Steve kind of sits down with Erskine and and even Steve's wondering why the heck he picked him. And Erskine kind of reveals part of it, and Erskine, to help explain it, kind of goes into his backstory. Because he's German, obviously. Because, yeah, the name Abraham Erskine is obviously German. But he explains that he lived in Germany when the Nazis conquered it. Because, like he said, people forget that the first country that the Nazis conquered was their own. And his work on, and even back then he was working on the super soldier serum. It wasn't complete, but he was still working on it. Hitler wound up hearing about him in the serum, and so he went to Erskine and wanted him to give it to him, and Erskine just told him no. At which point, Hitler decided to send one of his men, and this one was Johann Schmidt, who it turns out kind of had similar aspirations to Hitler, but as Erskine puts it, while Hitler kind of used these powers and mystical stuff for fantasy to try and inspire his men, Schmidt genuinely believes this stuff, hence why he went after the Tesseract before, in the beginning of the film. Sorry, dog, just moving around. Everything jumbles on this bed. As such, he feels that pretty much as such, the reason he felt like he deserved all of, as such, he felt that there was a greater power out there that needed to be wielded by a group of superhumans. And so when he heard about the super soldier serum, he wanted to take it. And while Erskine wasn't exactly willing, Schmidt still took it, and it apparently worked. But unfortunately, he still took it when it was incomplete, and so there were some side effects that we won't be seeing for a little while. But this is kind of where he gets to the point. It wasn't just the fact that it was incomplete that kind of led to these side effects, so to speak. As something he mentions is that the serum kind of enhances what's already inside. So if you have a good person and they take the serum, you're just going to be making them better, greater, a better person altogether. While if you're a bad person, you take the serum, it just makes you worse. And I'm going to take a small little detour for this to kind of go back to the Incredible Hulk. Because something that, going back to that. In the Incredible Hulk, remember with Emil Blonsky when they gave him essentially a second dosage of the super soldier serum? When he took it, we kind of started seeing him. I feel like the Incredible Hulk kind of backs up this claim that the Colonel is listing. Because, let's look at it this way. Emil Blonsky probably was the soldier that the Colonel wanted. And I'm not going to list the Colonel's name. I don't remember it. But pretty much, because he was strong, adept, followed orders, was great in a fight. But when he took the serum, he started lusting for the battle more, to the point where he was very willing to disobey orders, and he kept getting more and more hungry for a fight, to the point where he longed for more power. And so, which ultimately led to him becoming the Abomination when that desire kind of got him way over his head. So, I think it kind of makes sense. So, I can kind of understand where Erskine's coming from here, because we've kind of gotten because we kind of have that example, because that's kind of what happened to Blonsky / the Abomination in the Incredible Hulk. He was this perfect soldier. He already had strength. He already had power. It's just that when they enhanced what was already inside, it kind of increased his lust for battle to the point where he kind of disregarded everything else. That's all he lived for. He was already kind of a cranky. He wasn't a bad person, but he wasn't a good person. So as such, he turned a soldier with great fighting prowess who kind of was hardened by battle into a complete monster, and that's just from the few injections. And so as such, he says that. So but so that you can kind of understand that. As such, Dr. Erskine states that for someone like Steve, who never had strength in the first place, he will be able to take this and be able to make it great. And so Steve kind of does understand this, though he kind of feels a little insulted. And so the next day, Agent Carter takes him to Queens, so to speak, because that's apparently where their lab is, specifically in the back of an antique shop. And while on the ride there, we see Steve kind of awkwardly trying to talk to Carter, because apparently he's never really talked to a woman. And so he says that he's never really had that apparently the conversation he's having with Peggy is the longest time he's actually talked to a lady. And they even say, "Well, do you dance?" And so it's like, women don't really dance to someone that they could step on. It's like, or I'm just waiting. I think I'm just waiting for the right partner. And yeah, it's a cute scene, and it kind of hits close to home if you've seen later films. So yeah, So yeah, it's kind of cute. And so they get to the antique shop, and after giving like a code word, they go into the back, and we see this big science facility. And pretty much, like, this is where they're pretty much administering the super soldier serum. Where they're going to administer the super soldier serum. And they got senators there, the colonel, other backers, and pretty much they're all just sitting down. And Howard Stark is there. I forgot to mention that. As apparently he's a part of this. He's just he appears throughout the movie kind of doing stuff. So he is important, kind of. So, they see a pod there that Steve has to be strapped up to, and pretty much what they tell. And so, when Steve is hooked up to the machine, Erskine explains to the crowd, to these crowd of people, that what they're going to do first is that they're going to inject supplementary, like the doses of the serum into his muscular structure, which would alter him on a cellular level, and then after that they're going to expose him to Vita rays that will be able to create muscle expansion. As such, they pretty much do exactly what they said, like giving him a shot of penicillin and then they inject the serum, at which point they close up the capsule and expose him to Vita rays. And it does use up a lot of power, and they can hear him screaming on the inside to the point where Peggy tries to tell them to cut it off, but Steve tells him, no, just keep doing it, keep going. And so when it looks like they finally succeeded. Like when the power gets shut down, and when the pod opens up, Steve is no longer a little shrimp, as he's now bigger and a lot more ripped. As such, he falls out, and even to the colonel's like, well, I'll be damned, he did it. And it's actually kind of nice, and everyone's clapping, and so everyone's going down to congratulate Erskine for the success, and Steve's just still kind of recuperating. Only one guy, when he leaves, apparently left like a wallet behind. As such, as he goes down to see everybody, Erskine sees him, and the guy pulls out a gun and shoots Erskine right there. Immediately, people start freaking out, and the guy grabs like one vial of the serum that didn't get used. And so, as such, before they can chase after him, he hits a switch, and the office that everyone was in, the office where the crowd was in, explodes, because that's what that little wallet was. And so Carter Carter chases after this guy while Steve stands over the dying Erskine, who points to his chest to try and emphasize it's the heart that counts. As such, Steve runs out himself, and the guy manages to catch a ride with his contact. Though when he starts driving off, Peggy managed to get a good shot to the guy from the back and kills him with one shot to the head. That's just the car crashes, and so the agent calls a cab. I think either throws the driver out or kills him. One of the two. I don't know. I don't think we see a body. And then he drives around and tries to run over Peggy. And Peggy does shoot at him, but she misses. But Steven runs out and manages to push her out of the way just at the right time, so that she didn't get run over. At which point, Steve chases after the taxi, and the chase. And here's where we get kind of a nice little means of showcasing Steve's new abilities, as we see him running faster. We see his more physical prowess, seeing his strength, his new strength, his new agility, what he's capable of. It's actually a really nice way of showcasing his new powers without really feeling forced. It's actually kind of nice. Okay, maybe scratch that. It does feel a little forced, but it's still mostly a fun chase scene, and I like that. As such, Steve manages to get on top of the taxi to the point where I think he gets it to pull over, or I think the guy throws him off. Don't ask me. I forgot. I was taking notes during that point, so I didn't see that. But he does. I think he does not. But yeah. Oh yeah, he does get him to pull over. And so the guy gets out and he tries shooting at Steve, but Steve manages to take the door of the taxi and uses it as a shield. As such, he runs kind of into a yard, and he grabs a kid to use as a hostage, and so Steve chases after him, and the guy still shoots at him. And so the guy tries holding the gun on the kid, and Steve comes out to try and say, look, enough, it's fine. And so the guy tries shooting him, only turns out he used up all his ammo. So the guy just throws the kid into a harbor, and Steve tries to jump after him, but the kid can swim, so he's fine. As such, Steve chases after the guy, and the guy actually manages to get to a strange, weird, high-tech sub, and tries getting away, but Steve jumps into the water and manages to actually break the glass on the sub and pull the guy out. However, he tries asking him, and so as he pulls him out, he winds up when he throws him down, the guy ends up dropping the vial of super soldier serum and just and it breaks, pretty much spilling its contents. However, Steve tries saying, "Who are you and what are you doing? Who are you and who are you? Why did you do this?" But the guy says that he's just kind of the first step of what's to come, before he takes a cyanide capsule, and he says if you cut off one head and two more shall take its place before he finally dies. And I suppose this is kind of where I should get into some... Hold on a second. Yeah. I suppose this is kind of where I should get more into some of the backstory of what's going on with Johann Schmidt. Pretty much, while this is going on, throughout all this, it turns out that Johann has been using the Tesseract to he's been trying to essentially weaponize it with the help of a scientist by the name of Dr. Zola. And pretty much what they're doing is that they're pretty much concentrating the energy from the Tesseract and imbuing it into weapons that their soldiers can use. It's pretty much early forms of this technology are the sub, but he also has got guns, bombs, the advanced tanks. Pretty much he's just trying to weaponize it and use it as a more powerful force, and it seems to be working for the most part. Unfortunately, in fact, it was also Schmidt that called the kill on Erskine, because they found out where he was, and he's the one that ordered, and so he ordered and so he made the order. But unfortunately, the Nazis aren't exactly happy with this, because Johann is because something I forgot to mention is that Johann is the head of the scientific research division of the Nazis that's called Hydra. And so Hitler allowed Johann to just kind of free reign to do what he wanted, but only because he thought he'd get results. And unfortunately, because of them trying to go as far as they could with the technology they had, with building the technology with the Tesseract energy, they pretty much think that he's just kind of a lost cause. And when he starts talking to the point where one guy said that, quoting that Hitler said exactly, I think something about that time of the Red Skull, something about the Red Skull, time to stop humoring the Red Skull or something. I know he mentioned Red Skull, but it went along the lines of they're just not going to tolerate him anymore. And so when Johann hears this, he decides that he will show them what they're working on, as he brings them to the main room and shows them this gun powered by the Tesseract. And as he talks about how he's managed to actually find a power source for it with the Tesseract, they think he's just he's just cuckoo. That no such thing really exists, and that he's really just full of it. But one of the soldiers sees a map of his attack sites, and he sees that among the sites are some of the sites that they've acquired, including Berlin. And so they realize that he's actually planning to betray the Nazis. And so they say they'll report him to Hitler and that he'll be screwed. At which point Johann turns the weapon on these guys and he vaporizes them. That's exactly what happens. This gun shoots a laser that instantly vaporizes you the instant you get hit. So yeah, no one's going anywhere. And so Dr. Zola sees all this, and pretty much Johann makes it perfectly clear that they're no longer affiliated with the Nazis. That now they're going to be doing their own thing. That Hydra is now split off, and they're pretty much just going to rule. As such, back in America, the Colonel is chewing out some of the senators and sergeants for bringing in. Is chewing out, I think, one of the senators or something for bringing in a spy and an agent. But they realize that Hydra's pretty much showed its hand at this point, so they need to fight back. As such, Howard Stark, and Peggy Carter, and a bunch of other soldiers are going to go to the front lines to take the fight to them. But when Steve asks that he wants to come with, the Colonel says no, he's not coming. And his reasoning for this is he was promised, he said he was promised an army of super soldiers. And while they were able to take some of Steve's blood to try and hopefully create a new super soldier serum, Peggy says that any progress they'll make on it will probably be they're probably years away from actually synthesizing their own super soldier serum. Meaning that at the moment, Steve's all they got, and well, the guy, while he is impressed that he was actually able to turn him into this full-fledged soldier, the colonel thinks that he's just one man and he needs an army. So he thinks that Steve's pretty much just useless and that he's now just going to be benched. While Steve is annoyed at this, a senator, it could be the senator he was chewing out, or it could be another senator, I don't know. He goes up to Steve and says that while the colonel may not see potential in him, he does, as he gives in the newspaper. And Steve's story about saving the kid have now gotten out there, so he thinks that he can make a name for Steve. And so he says that he can have another way to serve his country. And so the next time we see Steve, it turns out his way of serving his country is being a showman that's meant to sell bonds. And what's his stage name? Captain America, of course. And I'll give this film credit. I kind of find this part very funny. Like, it kind of makes sense that in a World War II setting, if they're actually going to introduce Captain America in a more serious light, of course this would probably be how he got his name. Because, whether we like to admit it or not, Captain America was kind of created in a time where superheroes and that kind of propaganda and those kind of stories were the norm. So having someone as cheesy as Captain America, wearing this blue outfit with wings on the side of his mask, and wearing red, white, and blue and a shield, and going around punching Hitler, that's fun, but it ain't realistic. If someone in real life actually tried doing that, they'd probably be laughed at and thought of as a joke. So it kind of makes sense that in this continuity, where they are trying to be kind of more realistic, that Cap gets his name just from actually participating in this sort of thing. So it's kind of fun. Like, he's got his own, like, it's somewhat amusing and dumb, as you see him out there with the chorus of showgirls singing his song, as every night he has to recite his lines and talk about shooting a hit and fake punching a guy dressed as Hitler. And of course, everybody loves him. Everybody thinks he's cool. All the kids think he's great, and he managed to get his own comic books. And of course, the senator that's sponsoring him is milking this for all it's worth. But the show kind of comes to a halt when Steve is kind of brought to the front lines around November 1943, or at least 5 miles from it. And yeah, none of the soldiers are really interested in the guy in the cotton blue suit, as they think it looks so dumb. But, of course, and they only want the chorus girls. And so when Captain America is booed off stage, of course, he's feeling a little down. But this is also where Peggy, the Colonel, and Howard Stark are, so Peggy runs into him. And Steve kind of voices his concerns about how he feels like that he's not doing what he's supposed to. Like, on the one hand, because he's not allowed to go on the front line, so he feels like that he can't really do anything, because if he's stuck with the Colonel, he'd be turned to a lab experiment, as they kept trying to find ways to use his blood to synthesize new super soldier serum. But on the other hand, his way of serving his country is by performing a show in a silly blue outfit and calling himself Captain America. So he feels like that regardless of what he's doing, he's not helping that much. But Peggy assures him that whatever he wants to do, it's his choice, and that he's not restricted by anybody. But the conversation kind of turns to a grim spot as Steve sees some people injured rolling out, being pulled on a gurney and being brought out. And so Steve talks about it, and says that apparently they were ambushed, and apparently they sent out 500 men or something, and about only 50 or so came back. And Peggy even says that the men you entertained tonight was all that was left of the 107th Battalion. And so when Steve hears that and freaks out because they said that not a lot of people came back, he suddenly freaks out and wants to go see the Colonel. And while the Colonel still kind of sees him as a sideshow and doesn't think he really has any authority, Steve wants to know what the heck. He wants to know if someone by the name of Barnes came back, because Bucky was part of the 107th Battalion. And while the Colonel makes it clear that he doesn't want to take orders, he does state that apparently one of the people reported missing or dead was Barnes, and even telling giving Steve his condolences. But Steve asks, well, then what are you going to do to rescue the rest of the soldiers that have been captured? And so he says, we'll just win the war. It's like, why, you're not going to say to rescue? And the colonel kind of has credit. They're kind of outmanned and outgunned. They can't go, but it's way beyond enemy lines. If they went back there, they would kind of be screwed. As such, he says they're not going to really do anything, and while Steve says that he wants to do something, the guy tells him just back off and that he's got a show to do, and that he's got to be somewhere in 30 minutes. As such, Steve sees where the base is and says, yeah, I do. As such, he suits up, gets whatever he can, grabs a gun, grabs his shield because he had a little toy shield. And a nice little thing I like was that the shield that they gave him for the show is the shield that Captain America first had when he first started out. And so Peggy said, you're not just going to march all the way to Austria, are you? And he said, but if that's what it takes. And so Peggy, realizing that nothing is going to stop him, says that she's going to help him. As such, they have Steve grab one of the showgirls' helmets, the one with an A on it. And so Peggy manages to get Howard Stark to give her and Steve a ride via a plane. They tell him that he has to go in. They give him a transmitter so that he can get back out. But while they're talking, they're attacked, but they start getting shot at in the air. And so Steve says that, and so they said they're going to just fly in and drop him off. But Steve says that that's too risky. And so he grabs a parachute and tries opening doors, saying he'll parachute in. And she says, "What?" And says, "No, you can't do it." And it's like, "I'm going to do." And he says, "I got a parachute and I'm going to go under the radar. You guys turn around and come back for me." And so she says, "You don't have the authority to give me orders." And says, "Why can't I? I'm a captain." And so Steve jumps off the plane and parachutes in. As such, he manages to sneak onto the base by taking out the guards as he goes along, sneaking into a Humvee and just kind of getting along. Eventually managing to find where they're keeping all these guys and eventually knocking out the guards and throwing them the keys. As such, these guys are kind of like, well, okay. As such, these guys are like, well, who are you? He's like, I'm Captain America. And they ask, who are you? And he says, I'm Captain America. As such, and so, but they're guessing they're not complaining, and so they manage to throw, and so he throws them the key, and so he gets them all out, and he pretty much says that they should charge forward and try and take out and do whatever they can to get out of here. He's got, he'll be behind them because he needs to find the ones in charge. And so, in the meantime, all the soldiers in the 107th Battalion pretty much just go nuts. They just start charging in and taking out any soldiers they can. And in the meantime, they actually manage to overwhelm certain soldiers that have Tesseract-powered weapons, like the guns with the lasers, or just the tanks. And something I forgot to mention, while Steve was wandering around, he actually managed to find some of the technology that they were using that was being powered by the Tesseract, and even grabbed a little, I suppose you can say, casing or some kind of trigger or whatever, and pocketed it. So, as such, a few of the soldiers managed to grab a tank and use it to try and charge their way through, while one guy manages to grab a Tesseract gun and just starts shooting at them. But in the meantime, Johan, who is there, starts hearing about all the commotion and checks the security cameras, and he sees Captain America. And he knows that Cap is Erskine's work from the super soldier serum. And so he just starts going through the controls and sets the whole place to self-destruct, which even Zola thinks is a mistake, but he says, we're clearly outmatched here. And he says, look, we're clearly outmatched here. I think we should just abandon ship right now. Which, yeah, probably is a smart move. If Cap was able to get in here and free all these soldiers and they're causing so much commotion, they are probably screwed. However, as Cap is fighting through and all these Cap manages to get through, and as the explosions are ringing out, he manages to... I don't know if the explosions do ring out at this point, but he does manage to find Dr. Zola as he's retreating. However, before he can chase him, he hears moaning from a room, and so he goes to investigate, and he finds Bucky on a table kind of mumbling something. Of course, Steve is just happy to see his friend alive and well, and he manages to wake him up, and so when he manages to wake him up, he's like, Steve, is that you? He's like, yeah, it's me. He's like, what? I don't know that you were... Like, what happened? He's like, I joined the army. But as he's waking Bucky up, he sees a little map with all the points with all the locations of their bases on it, and he realizes that they're planning something, especially with all this technology. And so he manages to get Bucky out of the table, and they start making their way out, with Bucky asking questions. But I think that's when all the explosions start going down, as everything goes to hell in a handbasket, as things are blowing up everywhere. There's just violence all around with all the soldiers from the 107th Battalion. Steve is trying to get Bucky out of there as fast as he can, but as they're retreating and everything's exploding, that's when they run into Johan, who sees him and says that he's sees him, and I forgot to mention that as part of Steve's little tour as Captain America. He made films, so Red Skull mocks him about that, and so. Johan says that I probably just called him Red Skull. Sorry, but yeah, he said that he called me a failure, but I'm probably Dr. Erskine's greatest creation. And so Steve just tries punching him, and he ends up hurt. Johan doesn't even react, but you do see his skin start to peel right here. And so they get into a little fist fight, and it doesn't last long as Dr. So, alright, sorry, I have to keep going back to this. Dr. Zola, because they're fighting on a catwalk, and Dr. Zola hits a switch that separates the catwalk. And so, at this point, Johan... Yeah, it's obvious that whatever Johan's face is, it's not his real face. As he grabs the hem of it, rips it off, and yet we see that the side effects of him taking the incomplete serum was his head turning into a literal red skull. As such, he says that they're pretty much he and Cap are gods, and that he accepts it, but Cap refuses to. And so he and Zola make a tactical retreat, with Red Skull flying away in a rocket while he gives Zola the keys to his car. And so Cap realizes he can't go after Red Skull right then and there, but they eventually manage to. But he does manage to get Bucky across. But he doesn't manage to get. But they do manage to find an opening that Bucky's able to walk across before the banister that he was walking on breaks down. And so Cap is able to... And so he tells Bucky to go on without him, but Bucky says he's not leaving without Cap. And so Cap takes a few steps back and jumps, and we see him getting engulfed in fire. And next we see his colonel trying to write a condolence letter to the senator that sponsored Captain America, that they're saying he's dead. And he's pretty much angry at Peggy because she's kind of the one that encouraged it. That encouraged Cap, and he thinks that what he did was just pretty much just blind and was out of a crush and just blind faith and stupid. But he's soon proven wrong as he sees a bunch of soldiers going to the front of the camp, and we see Captain America walking out with all the soldiers behind him. And something I'll give the credit for the Colonel for. While he is kind of a jerk, he's humble in defeat. Like, he sees that Captain America even one super soldier is probably what they need. Is probably something that they need. And so he pretty much just, he doesn't actually say I'm sorry to Peggy, her defense for helping Cap was that she had faith in him, and so when seeing Cap there with all these soldiers, he does say, faith, huh? And even Cap says that he wants this, that he pretty much surrenders himself to any disciplinary charges that need to be brought up. But the Colonel says that none are necessary. That Cap saved all these people, and he's pretty much just proven himself at this point. As such, they do let him join the war. They do let him join the front lines officially, to the point where when the senator tries to use Cap in a publicity stunt by giving him a medal, it does not end well as they tell him he's not showing up. And this is where we see our Stan Lee cameos. He's a colonel in the crowd of people watching, when he sees the guy coming up to tell him this, he says, I thought he'd be taller. But in the meantime, Cap does tell him about the map he saw and gives them all the locations, and that there probably is another location that he thinks that there's another location that wasn't on there, and so the Colonel says that they need to get as many allies as they can to try and fight this. And so he tells Cap that he needs him, that he wants to assemble a group of the best men he has. And so Cap says, "Funny, I'm actually kind of doing the same thing." And so he manages to get a handful of soldiers from the 107th Battalion to join him in his army, including Bucky. And in the meantime, Cap goes to Howard Stark to try and kind of get him some better protection. Kevlar for better fights, but he needs better defense, and apparently something he realized that Cap is a partial to the shield, so he gives him all these other upgraded shields, but Cap finds himself attracted to one made of vibranium. which Howard tries blowing off because he says that it's just a prototype that's not for any use. But Cap likes it but Cap thinks it's cool and Howard states that the shield is probably made of that vibranium is some of the strongest metal in the world. And Steve says, "Well, that's great. Well, then why don't we have more of these?" And he says that it's also some of the most it's also the rarest metal. And that the shield that Cap just picked up is all that they could get of it. Of course, Cap wants to test it, and before he came in, and before Cap could see Howard, he ran into a secretary out there who heard about what he did about the battalion, and immediately is attracted to him and starts making out with him. And at that point, Peggy came in, and she and Steve have been hitting it off. And so when she sees him like that, she's now kind of peeved at him. And so when he wants to test out the shield, she immediately takes advantage of this. But she immediately tries using this revenge. She grabs a gun and just starts shooting at him, which he's able to block with a shield. As such, as she walks out, Cap and Howard are just kind of freaked out. But Cap isn't able to tell him, "I have some designs for the suit." And yeah, even earlier he said that he actually kind of was starting to grow to like the costume he had during the show. And so they kind of give him a more battle-ready version of it. Something that you would expect a soldier to wear. Like, it's got the greaves, it's got the jacket, it still has the star and the stripes, and it still has the dumb little A on his chest. But I'll give it credit. It kind of is a little silly, but it fits so well, and when we see and after this, we kind of have a nice little action montage of Cap and his battalion and his soldiers taking down Red Skull's bases, and it looks so dang fun. It's so awesome. It looks dumb, but it made it awesome. It's fun. I love it. It's just great. It's like, when you look at it initially, you think, that's a soldier, but then you actually see it in action and him kicking all these ass, and you're kind of like, okay, now I buy it. It's actually really cool. Like all you need is the right guy on the suit, and you can make it look awesome. And they picked the right guy, definitely. As such, unfortunately for Red Skull, as they destroy more of his bases, he's getting more and more impatient, and he just starts getting angrier and angrier, and that they need to kind of accelerate their plans before Captain America puts the kibosh on them. As such, Cap and his crew managed to hear about a train that's going through, I think the Alps or something. I don't know. They don't say where it is, or they do, and I just missed it. But pretty much the train is rumored to have that they said that Zola's on it. As such, Cap decides that Cap and his crew are getting ready to raid it with Captain America and Bucky going in first because they're pals. But when they get in, they find that when they manage to get onto the train, as they manage to sneak onto the train, they find that it's mostly empty. And so when Cap steps through a door into another part of the train, the door closes, and yeah, it's a trap, as both Captain America and Bucky are attacked by Hydra soldiers. Cap thankfully manages to take down the soldier that was fighting him by using his shield because the guy had twin blasters, but Cap was able to block them with his shield and eventually knock him out. And as for Bucky, he was able to try and fend himself away from he was able to fend off the soldier enough so that he wouldn't die. After Cap took out the soldier that gunning for him, he opens the door for them, throws Bucky a gun, and Bucky makes a shot at him, and as the guy dodges, he's in the direct path of a girder that they immediately use to smack him in the face and knock him out. However, another soldier ends up breaking in. This one more. Oh wait, no, the soldier that Cap fought ends up coming through and starts blasting, and then he ends up blasting a hole in the train. As such, as we see the hole. As such, while Cap was able to take him down, Bucky ultimately was near the hole, and he's now holding on for dear life on the outside of the train. Cap goes to try and save him, but unfortunately, Bucky loses his grip and falls off the cliff that the train was on into a snowbank that's far below. As such, while Cap and his crew are able to capture Dr. Zola, it's presumed Bucky is dead. As such, the Colonel does manage to kind of intimidate Dr. Zola into telling him what Red Skull's plans are, but unfortunately Cap is now down that his friend's dead. Point where he goes to a bar and tries to drink himself into a stupor, But unfortunately, thanks to the super soldier serum, he can't get drunk, which he is not really good for him because he kind of wants to be drunk right now. However, Peggy sees him and actually does try to be there for him, and their relationship has been repaired at this point because as part of the montage, they show like a film reel of Captain and his soldiers on the front lines, and we see that with we see a little compass or something that he had, or a clock had her picture in it. So yeah, he's pining for her, pining for her, and I'm guessing fighting through all these wars kind of was able to smooth things over enough. But she's there for him and is able to tell him that they need to be able to, that they need to be able to fight through this. And that Cap's kind of the only one that can take down Red Skull. But in the meantime, the Colonel explains what Dr. Zola told him, and that Red Skull is planning on doing is planning on directly bombing is pretty much aiming to take over the world. Like, it's not just like he's got, and with the technology and with the Tesseract technology that he has, it's something that he could probably do very easily, which Howard Stark is able to attribute because with the samples that Cap brought back to him, like just one little grain of this stuff caused a massive explosion in a lab that sent Howard flying back. So imagine having a whole battalion of people flying in kamikaze airships or something, or even with just bombs. It would be total destruction. As such, they're told that Red Skull is going to be blasting up his attack on America because he's going to attack there first within 24 hours, and they know that with all that technology and enough bombs and firepower, he could probably destroy the East Coast within an hour. As such, they need to find a way of trying to get it down. And one guy just says, "Well, we can't just can't barge in through the front door." And Cap says, "Well, why can't we?" And so they're all giving him looks, but the next day we see Cap actually doing that as he's on a motorcycle and charging right to the base, front and center. Of course, several guards and soldiers try stopping him, but he does manage to actually break through the barracks and get into the gates, and he does put up a good fight enough to take on the soldiers, but eventually he's cornered by two guys with twin flamethrowers who kind of cage him in, and by the time they let him out, he's surrounded by soldiers, so no matter how good he is with the shield, he's not going to be able to dodge all that fire. As such, he's brought to Red Skull directly, who kind of starts mocking him and actually asks him, "Well, what's so special about you? What about you made Erskine think that you'd be better? What makes you so special?" And Cap's response is, "Nothing special about me. I'm just a kid from Queens." At which point, Red Skull just kind of gets pissed and just starts punching him. And of course, Cap says that he can take it. He can do this all day, which is a line he said earlier when he picked a fight with a guy when earlier in the film when he was still skinny and a guy was insulting a film reel about the war. And so Red Skull just pretty much like, "Yeah, you probably could do this all day, but I've got a schedule." And so he pulls out his gun and tries to shoot him. But it turns out this is all part of Cap's plan. He was going to charge into the front gate so that all attention would be on him, while his soldiers wound up breaking in, and they managed to break in successfully, with some of the soldiers breaking into the room where Red Skull is, and them just starting to shoot up the place. Sorry, long nose hairs. And so with all that, and so the rest of the soldiers managed to get the go ahead as they charge right into the main base, guns blazing. As such, the soldiers start charging at everybody, but they're managed to gun them down as they still have the technology that they got from all the other raids, as well as their tanks and so forth. But Red Skull is just trying to get right to his plane, which is the plane that we saw Cap in the beginning of the film. And so Cap chases him through all these corridors and eventually gets in there, and eventually chases him there, but unfortunately Red Skull's already on the plane. It's already starting to take off, and so while they're able to take out some of the soldiers that were going to be flying in it, unfortunately Cap's not fast enough to catch up with it. Thankfully, he gets help from Peggy and the Colonel as they drive up in Red Skull's car. I'm guessing that either Dr. Zola had the keys or at the very least they grabbed it while they were raiding the place. And so they're able to catch up enough, especially since Red Skull's car has a boost feature in the back. And before they can go, So as they get Cap close enough to try and jump on before he goes, Peggy kisses him and tells him to pretty much just I forgot what it was, but it was sweet. She tells him to go get him, and the Colonel responds, "Don't expect me to kiss you." As such, they do manage to get him onto the plane by jumping on one of the wheels beneath it. And so as they're being brought up, Cap managed to get into the ship as it's flying away, and managed to start taking out the soldiers. And we see all the planes that are written where they're supposed to go, and I'm guessing they're kamikaze planes, or at least they have incendiary bombs inside them. I don't know. But Cap is able to take out the soldiers and even gets rid of two of the planes. One he drops in the ocean as they're flying, and the other he flies right back onto the planes. He flies back onto the plane as he was on it when it got jettisoned, and he killed all the soldiers that were on it. One guy actually got turned into malt because he got thrown into the propeller blade, so that was a pretty sight. But he does manage to fly in, and Red Skull hears all the commotion, so he sets the plane to autopilot and fly directly to New York. As such, Cap gets to the captain's quarters, where he and Red Skull immediately start getting into a fight / shootout, and Red Skull just mocks him, saying that we're better than them. We're like gods, and yet you wear the American flag. In a world in my world, there will be no flags. And Cap says that's not a world I want to live in. And so they both just get into it. And so they get into the fight. They get into their fight, and eventually escalates to the point where Cap throws his shield at the generator that has the Tesseract, and it's starting to cause it to overload. And even Red Skull says, "You idiot! You don't have any idea what you've done." As such, it kind of overloads to the point where they have to take it out, and we see the Tesseract in full glory, and Red Skull picks it up, and it starts radiating. And suddenly we see that Red Skull, and it suddenly opens up this clear view of the star line, and as Red Skull starts holding it, suddenly his body starts to kind of shred. And he starts wondering going up as his body just starts glowing on the Tesseract, and he starts freaking out, learning what's going on, and eventually gets to the point where his entire body is covered in this light. He just starts screaming, and then suddenly he's just sent into the stars, where he's just disappears to. And once it's gone, the Tesseract just stops lighting up, falls to the floor with all the excess power, burns a hole right through the plane, and falls into the ocean. As such, Cap is able to get into the pilot seat of the plane, but unfortunately, he doesn't know how to operate the controls, as the autopilot is still set for New York. He does manage to contact everyone and tell them what's going on, and they try to tell him that they're trying to bring him in for a landing, but he doesn't. But again, I think the controls are locked. I could be wrong. I think he could if he meddled enough, he probably could, but I'm guessing that he doesn't have enough time. And he doesn't have enough time because this thing's headed right to New York, but right now, where he is right now, the Arctic, he thinks that if they brought it down now, there are no casualties but his. Peggy tries to tell him, "No, you can't do this, but he says, I have to do this, it's my choice. Like, this is my choice, I choose to do this here." As such, she directs the plane to crash into the Arctic, and Peggy and him kind of say some sweet farewells as they talk about how they are going to share a dance with each other, and that they're going to do it on this club. That she doesn't want Steve to be late, and Steve says and as Steve talks about how they'd like him to play some slow music, the plane crashes into the Arctic, and yeah, she starts kind of breaking down, but at this point, but with Red Skull gone and with the main base kind of taken down, it looks like Hydra is no longer a threat. And so I'm guessing years pass as we see Peggy kind of looking over Steve's file, and we see as she finds a picture of him taken when he first arrived at their camp when he was still a shrimp. She starts looking at it longingly. We cut forward as we see the world ending, or as the war ending, or at the very least people celebrating the defeat of Hydra. And the final scene we see back in the 40s is a group of kids, as one of them has a garbage can lid and painted it like Captain America, as they're all playing at being Captain America and his soldiers. But that's also not where the film ends. As we cut to the present, as we cut back to Cap, as he wakes up in a recovery room, in a hospital bed / recovery room. He starts looking around a little confused, but he kind of pays special attention to the radio as he hears a ball game being played over it. Immediately, a woman comes in and tries talking to him, and he asks, "Where am I?" And it's like, you're in a recovery room in New York. He's like, "Where am I really?" It's like, "What do you?" It's like, "What do you mean?" It's like it's like the ball game playing on the radio. That took place in March 1941. I know because I was there. And so he starts getting angry, asking, "Where am I? What's going on?" And so she tries to calm him down, but she realizes he's getting rowdy, so she calls in so she hits a little thing, and it calls in some soldiers, which Cap immediately throws right out of the room. And yeah, it turns out the whole room he's in is fake. It's all just a fake, and he starts charging out, and she starts calling out a code 13 as Cap starts running out of the building. And we see a bunch of agents seeing Cap as he's running around, he eventually managed to get out of the building right in the middle of Times Square, New York, in the modern day, as he sees all these billboards and lights and all these cars driving by, and he just kind of looks amazed. But it all comes to an end as we see Nick Fury there with his car, as he goes to Cap and tells him he's been asleep for a long time, and the last scene is Cap saying that he's just really late for a date. That he's really late for a date. And those aren't the exact lines, but yeah, it's just kind of a little sad. But of course, we get our after credit scene after this, and it's not really less than after credit scene, but just final affirmation of what's going to happen. As the last scene in this film is we see Cap in one of those little gyms with a boxing ring and a bags and everything. We see Cap hitting a punching bag, and as he knocks it to the floor, Nick Fury comes in and tells him that he's got a mission for him. And so as Cap asks what the mission is, Nick Fury states that, and it suddenly changes to a trailer as we see as it's a really kick-ass trailer as they finally say that the Avengers are going to be coming the next year, and yeah, I think that's actually kind of the perfect way to build up to the Avengers, because at this point you've been doing individual movies and hinting at it. I think the best way you want to show off the Avengers is just to say we're doing the Avengers now. So yeah. So what do I think of this film? I think it's all right. It ranges between all right and pretty good, but I would still say it's like better than, say, Thor. I think it's kind of near the same level as Iron Man 2 in terms of the quality for these films. But unlike Thor, it's not underwhelming. I think the film's biggest flaws are kind of a little bit of its pacing. Like, there are several moments of the film that feel like they're kind of rushed in a way. Like the montage, like with Cap, the montage where Cap finally becomes an official soldier and starts taking out the Red Skull's bases. I feel that's rushed and kind of weird. Seeing Cap rushing to Cap and taking part of the program to select the super soldier, to select who's going to be the super soldier. I think that's a little rushed as well. Like, it could have been better. I feel like we could have benefited from seeing more. Even Red Skull's backstory, I feel, is just kind of rushed out there so that they can establish, okay, this guy was nuts and that he's obsessed with Norse mythology and yada yada yada. So I feel like it has some pacing issues in certain areas, even near the ending, and even kind of laced throughout. Seeing Cap rushing forward as we see him in his stage show. That kind of feels like it's a little rushed. Like, seeing him go through it, like, time keeps passing and we keep seeing him go by, and we keep seeing him go through all this stuff, and I understand, and unfortunately it feels like it kind of halts the movie, or you keep missing essential stuff, and it does kind of get annoying, and a kind of a consequence of this is that certain characters don't get as much time dedicated to them as other characters, like, for example, Bucky. Like, I got enough of his he was showcased enough so that he had a definable character, and you can believe he and Cap had a close friendship. Seeing them kind of bond, hang out, be happy for the other's successes, get annoyed at each other and rib each other. It's nice. I like that. I do like that. But we don't get a lot of scenes with him, and so as a result, when we get his eventual fall, let's call it, you do feel it's more of a, oh well, that sucks moment rather than, oh crap, that guy, this character died. Like, it doesn't mean the same thing to us as it does for Cap. And that's kind of unfortunate, and unfortunately, that's a bit of a problem. Because, again, it's not to the point where you don't like him. Like, he's not unlikable. And we do get enough scenes to establish his character. We just needed more time with him, is all I'm saying. We just needed more scenes with him. Like, I feel like that, like, I think a better way they could have handled him gone is if if he died in the climax, is that if he was quote-unquote killed in the climax, if we had more personal scenes with him and Cap. And in the climax, when they raided Red Skull's main base, he was caught in the crossfire, and in the battle he was knocked off the cliff, and Cap saw him, which would in turn fuel him even more to go after the Red Skull, which I think would have been great. It would have been giving us more time, and I think it would have been a perfect way for him to kind of go out and kind of project him as a stronger character. But unfortunately, because of the way this film is paced, that doesn't really get to the. It doesn't really help. It's a similar case with Cap's soldiers. Those guys, I don't know any of their names. I don't think they say any of their names in these films. I know there are soldiers that help out Cap, but I know nothing about them. And they're kind of like Thor's gang, except there's less time dedicated to them than they were with them. Like, at least in Thor, those guys had scenes that let you know that they were getting suspicious of Loki. Here, these guys are competent soldiers, but they're not really characters. They're just kind of there to help out. They're just there to help out Captain America. With that being said, though, at least they do have a lot. That being said, though, I guess they are still entertaining, I suppose. But I think once again, another flaw, but again, as another consequence of the pacing is that some parts of the story are just kind of, like the subplot with Howard Stark isn't exactly that great. Like, Howard is in the film, but his friendship with Captain America doesn't feel as defined as it should. Once again, you get enough moments between them that you know that they like each other and that they're growing a friendship, but not enough so that you feel like that they're a deep personal friendship. Now again, it doesn't have to always be like that. As something I forgot to mention is that part of the ending for the film, where they're dealing with the fallout of this, is that Howard Stark starts combing the sea, trying to look for Captain, and what he was tracking was an energy source, and his divers managed to find the Tesseract. But even after finding it, he still wants to find Cap. And you could easily make the argument that Cap going out as heroically as he did kind of made him think, we need him. We need this guy. We need to help him. But I think the idea what they're going for was that he and Cap kind of grew more closer, though I suppose, again, you could probably still make the argument that this guy was a brave soldier that sacrificed his life, and he just wants to pay his respects to him, so I suppose that you could say that's the thing with that. But otherwise, aside from getting the Tesseract, he's there, provides the tech, provides the gear, and he's there to help give that same Stark level wit and charm, which he's able to pass along to his son. So, yeah, he's just kind of there to help be the weapons guy. But with that, and I think the final flaw of the film is unfortunately the villain. And credit to Hugo Weaving, he does still. He's a fun actor. Like, even if whether you like him or dislike him, you can't help that there is his way of acting is very intense and really nice, and for the first half of this film, I think he does great as the Red Skull. He's intimidating, his voice is quiet, he's threatening, yet charming. Like, every scene with him, you feel like he's just doing everything he could not to deck a guy, or, like, all you have to do is just push him a little bit, and he will snap your neck. And that's kind of how it is. Like, he has the charm and a wit, and he seems kind of polite, but you can tell that underneath that politeness is a snake. A snake that will bite you if you get too close to him. And that's kind of how he is. How he is throughout the first half of the movie. It's mysterious, it's nice. He's kept in the shadows. When he's got his mask off, he's in the shadows. He's actually really interesting and really nice. in the first half of the movie. The second half, he becomes kind of generic bad guy supervillain fare. Like, admittedly, when he first takes off his mask, he still kind of keeps up his way of so smooth he can get away with murder, as he still claims that they're gods and that he's better than Cap. So, and even when he and Dr. Zola are just retreating and he's going to the rocket, he said, "Well, where am I?" And then he just drops him just gives him his keys. He's like, not a scratch, Doctor, not a scratch. And he just calmly walks into the rocket as he gets into a tactical retreat. But after that, you see him start breaking down more, and I can understand him getting angry at this. But instead of having it be subdued and kind of have it be like how it was in the first half of the film, he actually is just full of, he's making fools of you! Fools of you! Get better! Get stronger! I am a god! Yada yada yada. He devolves into the standard supervillain fare, and it gets kind of ridiculous. It kind of makes him lose credibility, and it kind of stays that way through the rest of the second half of the film. And it's just annoying. Like, I feel like if they had kept that same debonair and charm, and you could still show him being angry. Like, you could see kind of maybe him glaring or him just kind of doing that. That could have looked threatening, especially since his head is a literal red skull. That can be terrifying if you give it the right motivation. But because they kind of turn him into just kind of typical bad guy supervillain fare, it kind of loses you, and unfortunately, it's just not that great. It's just not that entertaining. The first half, I think, was great. It definitely made you feel like this guy was nuts. It definitely made you it gave him a threatening vibe, and he definitely kind of felt like he was Captain America's greatest rival. It's just that once Cap starts scoring victories, it's just, nah. That's what he is, it's nah. So, yeah. But with that being said, what do I like about this movie? Well, while there are certain characters that suffer because of the quickened pace, there are other characters that are allowed to shine. Once again, while Bucky doesn't have the connection with Bucky doesn't feel as strong as it should be considering his and Cap's history, at the very least, he is still likable. Same goes for Howard Stark. Actually, scratch that. First thing I'd do, the writing. The writing for this film is great. Like, all the characters are written perfectly. All the actors, I think, do a great job of portraying him. Portraying them, and hold on a second. Sorry about that. I had to look up his name. Tommy Lee Jones is the one that plays the Colonel, and he plays him. I love the way he plays him, coming off as kind of the straightforward a straightforward dick that he would straightforward dick in the way he plays him. He's straightforward, stone faced, and just just takes no one and just doesn't take crap from anybody. And I think that works great. Like, he comes off in the beginning as kind of a dick to Steve, but in a way you can kind of understand where he's coming from, even to the point where he eventually accepts Steve. Because he's told that he's going to be getting an army of super powerful, strong soldiers, and yet he's being told that their first candidate is this shrimp who can barely get through boot camp. But then he's proven wrong. He actually does get his great big super soldier. They lose, but then the guy who created it gets killed before they can make more of it, and their last vial is destroyed, leaving him with only one guy. And yeah, one guy does not an army make. And then on top of that, then he hears that this one guy ran behind enemy lines. He pretty much assumes he's dead, and he starts giving flack to Peggy. Again, this all is kind of reasonable thinking. Like, this guy is a straightforward general. Is just a straightforward soldier. He kind of wants to win the war the best way possible, in the best way possible. And the fact that, and he's trying to work with whatever he's gotten, but when he's given things that he thinks kind of suck, it does make it perfectly clear that he's not working with it. But by that same token, he's kind of humble in defeat. Like, when he thinks I think if he feels that you're deserving of his sympathy, he gives you that. When he actually saw Steve Rogers get big and muscular and turn him this skinny little shrimp who probably wouldn't be able to actually fight, who would probably not even last a minute in a fight, and he doesn't. We saw him earlier. He fought a guy, who was yelling at a theater, and while Steve was not backing down, he kept getting his ass kicked. He did at very least acknowledge that what Dr. Erskine created was great. But then And then when he saw that his doubts about one soldier not being enough are put to rest, when this one soldier managed to free every single soldier captured from the 107th Battalion, he's just kind of like, you know what? We can use this guy. We can use him. And so they work with him. They let him pick his he lets him pick his soldiers, and he starts using him, and he starts working with him as diligently as he worked with him before. Even to the point where I love the interrogation scene between him and Dr. Zola as he gets him a steak dinner with mashed potatoes and not Brussels sprouts. Asparagus. That's what it. Not asparagus. Screw it, I'll just say asparagus. Someone correct me in that, because I know I'm wrong here. Someone correct me. I gotta look it up. Maybe I should look it up. Anyway, as I was saying, as I was saying, as they keep eventually, as he's just casually eating the steak, he tells them about how they can either turn him over, how they can either pretty much throw him under the bus, or he can give them the details they need to take down Red Skull. Either way, this guy's kind of screwed. Either way, Dr. Zola's screwed. So yeah, I liked that, and his straightforwardness and just general attitude is great, as it shows a very strong, stern soldier who won't take your crap, but will gladly step aside if he's proven wrong, especially if it means that him being wrong means that they have an advantage. I like that. And Peggy, I love the relationship between Peggy and Captain America. That's, I think, really well. And the actress that got to play Peggy really does play her off as a straightforward, strong woman who really does not like taking anyone's crap, but can be kind and caring when she feels she needs to. Howard Stark's actor, I think, is great as he plays the young Howard Stark with the same snide and charisma as you would expect from Tony, though to a different degree. I think he's actually a little bit more arrogant, and I kind of find that a little entertaining, especially when things aren't going his way, because I think there are a couple instances where he goes his way, and rather than kind of letting it roll off him, he just gets a little annoyed. He just starts getting annoyed. So I kind of like that. I think that's fun. But at the very least, and again, Hugo Weaving in the first half I think was great as Red Skull. Again, second half kind of devolved. But I think the best actor they got was Chris Evans as Steve Rogers / Captain America. As he plays it perfectly. Captain America, from start to finish of this film, I think is the strongest character emotionally. Like, he is definitely a Boy Scout, but he's firm in his beliefs. Like, no matter how many times, he's weak, but he wants to fight. No matter every time someone says, you will die out there, he says, well, why not? Because in his mind, these are bad people trying to put others down just because they're different, and he thinks that's not right. And it makes sense. This kid, in the beginning, he's a shrimp. He's a shrimp with nothing. Even when he's probably been picked on for most of his life. And the only reason he doesn't run away from fights is because he knows that if he does, then that's pretty much just giving the jackass what they want. You running away like a coward. That's why whenever he gets into fights, he doesn't let himself stay knocked down. That's why he says, I can do this all day. Because he knows that if you give these jerks the satisfaction of lying down and dying, you pretty much let them win. And even if he knows he's gonna die, even if he knows that he'll be out there dying, at least he'll be dying defending people. At least defending people, saving lives. When he wants to join the army, it's not for glory or for any fame. It's because he thinks that it's just the right thing to do. And I'll give him credit. I wouldn't do that. I'm a coward. I will openly admit, I'm a coward. You say, hey, you want to join the army? I would say, hey, what's that over there? And then while your back is turned, I will run. I am that much of a stooge, and look at this. I would not last long. But that's the strong thing about Cap. He's such a great character. And I think that's the best thing with superheroes. My two favorite kinds of superheroes are the ones who are uncompromising in their morals, to the point where I'm not gonna say, and I'm not saying, oh, they should be perfect, but at the very least, they're willing to fight for what's right, and they're not willing to let anyone tell them that they're wrong, and they're just saying, and they just keep saying, we need to fight to help people because it's just the right thing to do. And on top of that, we do actually get more of a character to him, as we see him be awkward with Carter, see him kind of being a little weird, we see him being a little snide and making jokes, we see him kind of rolling with the punches. We see him rolling with the punches and making quips. We see him actually being a good person. We see him being confused at people. He is just kind of generally a dork and a wimp, but he's a dork and a wimp with a strong heart and strong morals, who you definitely think is deserving of being Captain America. And his journey throughout the film is great. Seeing him start from as a kid from Queens, and throughout the whole film, that's all he sees himself as, a kid from Queens. Just this one guy who just happened to get a lucky break. Because even Red Skull says, "What did he see in you that was so great?" And while Cap doesn't probably see it, because he says, "I don't." It's like, there's nothing special. I'm just a kid from Queens. That's what makes him special. That he didn't want this power for the sake of having it. He got this power because he was a good person. So when he got it, he used it to help others. And that's, I think, a great thing for superheroes. Because they can be that ideal. They can be someone we can look up to. People who can inspire us to be better than who we are. They can be people that they can be people like me who are afraid, but then they think, what's the right thing to do? What's the right thing to do? And in selfish situations, and also happened to me, where there have been times where I've wanted to be selfish. Wanted to just be like, why should it be my problem? But then I have that voice in my head that says, but would that be the right thing to do? And that's just yeah. That's what I feel like that a superhero could be, and I feel like should be. It should be that ideal. And I'm not saying that all superheroes should be perfect. There are a lot of flawed superheroes. There can be superheroes, and I think the two angles you can go with a superhero are people that you can either look up to or relate to, and because both can allow you to probably help improve yourself. But Captain America for Marvel is kind of like the person you should aspire to be like, as he's uncompromising, unwilling to back down. It's just a strong moral high ground that I think is great. And that doesn't mean he's perfect by any means, because he's a dork and he can make mistakes, as we see in other movies. He can become emotionally invested in other things. But for what we have here, it's a great, strong start to his character that I think is great, and I love it. I love seeing it, and seeing it come to life, and even seeing him violently sacrifice himself just to save everyone else, I think is so good and just amazing. And I guess one last thing I can talk about is the effects. Like, I'm not really an effects nut. They're just there to help support the story, if you ask me. I suppose that they're all right, because they obviously have to use some form of CG for Steve when he's a shrimp, because odds are Chris Evans cannot lose a lot of weight just that he could, and somehow made himself shorter just for that one role. So that brief period. So I doubt that would happen. But yeah, they're all right. I'm probably not going to talk about effects again. I don't want to talk about effects again. Like I said, they're just there to support the story. So that being said, the faults of this movie, I think, are it has some pacing issues that unfortunately that's some pacing issues. One plot. Oh yeah, that's something I forgot to mention. The plot line with the Captain America as a sideshow, I felt was a little intrusive. I understand why it was there, but I felt like it could have been a lot short. I feel like it shouldn't have had as much time dedicated to it. I don't know how you would have worked with that. I feel like a little intrusive, but I know why it was there, so I'm kind of forgiving. Though I feel like it could have been done better. Don't ask me how. I just don't know. But yeah, overall, I feel like it has some pacing issues. Either it can be a little rushed or it can be a little sidetracked. As a result of that, some characters don't have as much of a deep connection as you have with certain characters as you do with others. Some scenes can feel like they are too rushed. The villain starts strong and then kind of devolves halfway through into just kind of a generic supervillain fare. But I think it's well written. The action, I think, that's something I forgot to mention. The action actually is really nice. Kind of a big difference between Thor is that it's a lot more personal, because it's more human factor. You can see all the sweat and tears that go into it. Seeing Cap have to deal with fighting with a shield, fighting hand-to-hand with guns, weapons, all that stuff. It actually does feel really nice, Not great, but still nice and fun to look at, especially when they're doing the larger stuff, like when Cap and Bucky are jumping onto the train. I think that was fun. So, But so yeah, that's a good point. It's got like the writing. Well, the story doesn't have a lot of good pace to it. Doesn't have has some poor pacing in areas. The writing, I think, is where it shines. The acting is great. The action is fun and nice. I love the journey with the main, and I think the main character, I think, is the strongest thing, and I love his journey. I love seeing where he comes from. I love seeing what he becomes and where he ends up by the end of the film. I think that's great. Just overall, I feel like this film is okay, is pretty good to okay, or pretty good to decent, in that range. I think it's good, but at the end of the day, I think its biggest strength, but I think at the end of the day, it's just another fun movie. It's not a great movie, but it is fun, and you can't really fault a movie for that. So, yeah, fun movie. Not a great movie, but certainly a fun one. So, yeah. That's all I have to say. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and tune in next week where we see all the heroes that we've met so far come together as we take a look at the film that was built up over the course of several years with the Avengers.